Thank you for joining us today at Naturally Scott. I'm Scott Harris, and I'll be your host on this journey as we discuss birds, wildlife, parks, nature, and the environment. At least once a week, I'll bring you the very best of America's spectacular world of nature, from birds to mammals to reptiles and amphibians, from soaring mountains to endless plains, from rugged coastlines to rivers and streams. Every episode will feature an expert guest, a ranger, a researcher, a birder, an author, a biologist, or an adventurer, someone who has seen what we want to see and been where we want to go. This isn't just another nature show. It's a safari for your eyes and ears. Now let's get started on today's adventure. And as always, stay curious. This is Scott Harris with Naturally Scott, and I am absolutely thrilled today to welcome Sy Montgomery to our podcast. This is going to be a treat for you listeners. Many, if not most of you, already know about Sy, know some of her books, but we're going to talk about a bunch of them today, as many as Sy wants to talk about. So Sy is a guest in the book I've mentioned previously on the podcast called Why We Love Birds, 52 Birders on Birding. Sy is one of those. But Sy is, I don't mean to diminish birders, but Sy is so much more than a birder. We will talk about some of her birding books, but she's got other great books. She's a naturalist and a scientist and an author and a writer and a lecturer and all kinds of things. But what they all add up to is a remarkable storyteller for both children and adults. I must not be all that bright. I can't differentiate between her children's books and her adult books, but from what I read, they tell me that there is a difference. So maybe that is the case. But we're going to talk about a lot of this stuff today. Like I said, Sy was kind enough to be a part of Why We Love Birds, and we became friends through that. And for that, I am honored and thrilled. And Sy, if I have this right, you have now published almost 40 books.
Yeah. This September, It'll be number 39, and I've got 3 more in the pipeline coming out next year.
Oh, my goodness. Well, we're going to talk about number 39, but we're going to go through some other things first, and we're going to save it till close to the end so that people can remember it and go right online and order it. But I think it comes out September 8th, September 9th?
Yeah, September.
Okay, perfect. And you write, well, let's share this, because this is, for me, this is awe-inspiring. I want to make sure I get this right. You have 5 New York Times best-selling books. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, that is mind-numbing. Most of us haven't read 5 New York Times best-selling books, but to have written them, and let me make sure I have these right. The Soul of an Octopus, The Good Pig, How to Be a Good Creature, Of Time and Turtles, and that's a hint toward her 39th book, by the way, and Becoming a Good Creature. Do I have those right?
You have them absolutely right, Scott.
Okay, perfect. And seriously and sincerely, congratulations. It is, what a fantastic career to have done that. I think it's I think it's thrilling. I think it's an honor to get to speak to you.
Well, it's mutual, and I'm very excited about your new book, Scott. And I feel like I got to kind of be in on the ground floor with that.
You did, and more than the ground floor. And in fairness to you, and to be candid with the listeners and the viewers, you getting involved early was significant in my getting some other people involved. There was a lot of, well, if Sy's going to do it, I'm going to do it. And so, you know, that the value of that can never be underestimated, nor can I fully share my appreciation, but I really do treasure that. I'd like you to tell me the difference between your children's books and your adult books. What are you thinking when you're writing one and writing the other? And do you know before you start which one it's going to be?
Yes, I do. Sometimes with the adult book, I'll feel like, gee, it would be just so great to involve young people with this as well. So I have a number of books on a certain subject, like octopuses or turtles or tigers or pink dolphins, etc., that there was an adult version that took years and years to write and research. But then there's a children's book on the same general subject. They're not always just a children's distillation of the adult book, but it's on the same subject. And so you bring to that children's book often years of research, which is unusual with children's books, generally because they don't pay enough to warrant living in India studying tigers for
Right.
multiple expeditions. But once you've already done that, you can bring that to a children's book.
You've got that knowledge and that experience. I've written one children's book called Isaac and Iggy. It's about, you might remember 4 or 5, or it's more now, 8 or 9 years ago, there was a freeze in Florida and the iguanas
Oh,
started to fall out of
happened
the
and I
trees.
freeze. Oh my god.
Their metabolism would shut down and they would lose muscle and or muscle ability, and they would fall out of the trees, but they didn't die unless the impact killed them. But
Mm.
it wasn't the cold that killed them. And so I wrote a book about a small boy that took one and took it home and warmed it up and kept it, and then eventually let it go. And of all the books I've written, it might be my favorite.
Oh,
I loved writing it. And it makes a very easy gift for our friends who have grandkids or, whatever, to send that out. So you do a lot of speaking engagements. You stop by a lot of bookstores and stuff, which is fabulous that you're doing that, because it helps keep small bookstores alive, which I think is a valuable thing for all of us. What is the reaction when the kids come?
oh man. Well, when I write my kids' books, I'm writing for people who are just as smart as I am. They just haven't been alive as long as I have, and they may not have as extensive a vocabulary, but they often have the exact same kind of curiosity and wide-eyed wonder about the world that I do. So connecting with these kids is fabulous. It's a great dose of delight for me. It's a great way for me to reconnect with that wonder that you have when the whole world is new to you. And I think it's great also for kids to see an adult who hasn't quote unquote outgrown animals, an adult who can tell them that no, you don't have to buy the lie that the world is about having a whole bunch of stuff or a whole lot of money or this kind of a resume. The real world is the world that you are naturally focused on and interested in. Kids are naturally so attracted to the things that you and I, Scott, are attracted to. They love nature. And so to connect to them, to have a, 67-year-old person telling them, guess what? I've made my whole life about doing just what delights you. And you're on the right path. And come along with me and you're going to love this ride. It's just fabulous for all of us. And I have made friends with children on some of my book tours and speaking engagements who are now adults, some with kids of their own. And it's just such a wonderful blessing to connect with these young souls.
So you're reaching a third generation of Montgomery readers.
Yeah, I guess I've been at this a long time.
I hope you stay long enough to get to a fourth generation.
Well, I'll take my vitamins, Scott.
So, so where is it that you think the light starts to go out? Where do we become too cool to not be awed by a pink dolphin or a hummingbird or a gorgeous flower unfolding in the morning? When does that start to go away?
Well, I do think that adults in general are pushing this lie that everything has to be about, having enough money to be secure, which makes children fearful, I'm not going to
Of being
I'm not
insecure.
going to be secure unless I have a whole lot of money. And then there's like this peer group pressure thing that happens that you have to have these kinds of clothes or you have to have this kind of car or, this kind of phone. There's the attraction of all of our gadgets, which tend to draw people inside. And they don't realize that, just looking at any live animal outside is going to be even greater than watching the greatest nature special on TV. And I
Do you see?
get that though when they're young, you take kids, sometimes you take itty bitty kids to the zoo and you want them to see the panda, but they're watching the ant on the sidewalk because to them, they're all equally thrilling and equally exciting.
I have mixed views about zoos. I think there's an argument in favor, and then there's an understandable argument against. When I had my marketing company, we had a zoo as a client. I'm well familiar with zoos. I'm certainly not strongly against them, and I understand that many people who haven't been blessed like you have, or maybe I have, to travel the world a little bit and see some of these things. The only time they're ever going to see an elephant or a leopard is in a zoo. So that's the balance, of course. But we take our grandson to the zoo a lot, the Greenville Zoo here in South Carolina, and we get annual passes. And I see some parents, they seem to have a checklist, like birders with a list. You know, the child might be enjoying the chickens in the petting zoo. And no, we have to go check off the monkey and the zebra and the this. And the kid, to your point, if the anthill is exciting, let them hang at the anthill. You know, if they're loving the chickens or the leopard or the dolphin or whatever it is, then that's as great a way to spend a morning as anything.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's, I don't know, it's an interesting thing. Have you, in your extensive writing career, do you see adults that are reemerging, that are rediscovering that joy and that curiosity and that willingness to let go and jump up and down and say, my God, did you see that lizard? It was right on the windowsill.
Yes, absolutely. And I think people do have a hunger for this because, you know, after all, we are the same species that we have been for hundreds of thousands of years, which was a hunter-gatherer species until like 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Now we're a shopper-gatherer species, but, you know, we're still doing that hunting and gathering thing. And we are set up to pay attention to the natural world because if you did not do this, you got eaten by something or you couldn't find anything to eat yourself. So I think we do hunger for that connection with the natural world, which is why all of a sudden there's a thing called forest bathing that adults do to just go out into the forest and you're not taking a bath in the forest pool, but you're immersing yourself in the forest. And
Is that a term, forest bathing?
it's an actual thing, and there's books on how to do it, and there's like programs of doing it. Here in Hancock, New Hampshire, population like 1,600 people, we have a wonderful nature center that offers like classes in forest bathing, and some of the big schools in nearby Boston also offer opportunities for students to go forest bathing. And it's almost like a soul cleanse to just spend some hours in the forest paying attention to the sounds and the smells and the sensations that nature offers us. And it is so much more fulfilling than the continual itch of watching things on screens. You know, you can never scratch that itch and satisfy it.
No, to me, it engages the itch.
Yes,
I mean, I love watching the documentaries on TV. I forget the name, but the one that Barack Obama did the voice work for was great.
I totally love them too.
And the newer one, the Tom Hanks one, The Americas.
Oh, I've been wanting to watch that. And
oh my God,
I
Sy,
totally agree. I totally agree.
well, by the way, set aside 10 hours because once you find the first one, you'll watch the next 9. But what it does for me is it doesn't satisfy the itch. It just gives me a large notepad of things that I want to study or places I want to go. And I consider myself not an expert at all, but not by any stretch as a naturalist, but I consider myself fairly well read and fairly well traveled. But I watch these shows and every one of them's like, I didn't know that. Honey, did you? It's just shocking to me how little so many of us know relative to what's available to us.
Yeah, it's a great launch pad for your imagination.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. And I think, to back up for a little bit, that is what your books do. They engage the imagination, they ignite the imagination or reignite it, since we usually have it as children. And I think they reignite curiosity as well. And that's a gift. I love all books. I've been reading my whole life. I promised my mom in 1974 I'd read one book a week for the rest of my life, which I've done.
That's great. What a great present for your mother.
It was a great gift for me. I thought I was giving my mother a gift, but I gave myself one. I consider myself pretty well read. And a lot of books are fun. They're enjoyable. You read a mystery, you read whatever. But your books, they are a gift to the reader because it is hard to finish one of your books and not think, oh, now I need to X. I need to read more. I need to travel more. Maybe I even need to write a little bit. And that to me is fantastic. And I want to talk about that, and we will. We're going to talk about your books because They're just so dang exciting. But I want to back up because in doing a little bit of research, there are some things we didn't cover in why we love birds because we didn't have time. We don't have the space. But are you an Army brat? Was dad a brigadier general and mom was a pilot and worked for the FBI?
Yes, she did not work as a pilot for the FBI, but she was a pilot at a time when,
Women didn't.
women were not, they called them aviatrixes. They weren't aviators.
Seriously?
Yes, aviatrix. So she was an aviatrix. She was real smart. She grew up in rural Arkansas, not in a rich area. She used to hunt squirrels to eat them because that's what you ate. And then let's see, she was valedictorian, I think, of her class at Arkansas Tech and went to Washington, D.C., got a job working for the FBI. Back then, women were secretaries, and met this, then he was either a light colonel, I think he was a light colonel back then, and, the rest was a wonderful love story between my parents. So, yeah, and so as a result, my family moved a lot, and
Now you started in Frankfurt?
yeah, I was born in Frankfurt, and that was where I went to my first zoo, which was the Frankfurt Zoo. My parents took me in as a toddler, and I broke free of their hands, as toddlers do, and when they found me, I learned this from them. I don't remember it at all, but I apparently was in the hippo pen. So
That is not a safe pen to be in
not great.
necessarily.
My mother never got over that. I was fine. The hippos were fine. But I was
Well,
one of those kids that I could sit still, and I would watch my parents. This just shows you how old I am, the era that I was born in. Children sat for portraits, and my parents had a portrait commissioned of me as a very small child. And to get a child to sit still for a portrait, I don't know anyone whose child would do that now. What they did, they they lit a candle, and I watched the candle burn for hours.
okay. Do you still have the portrait?
No, there's nothing left from that. But there were 2 of them, and I was really young. I mean, I was young where you, like, haven't even started to really grow a lot of hair. Uh,
Were you in a white frilly
I
dress?
guess I was in some kind of a thing. Um, I didn't keep those, but because who would want them? But the ability to sit still and watch something, I think, has served me very well. As you know, as a birder, if you're, like, wiggling or talking or the bird's gonna fly away. But if you can sit and focus your attention, you're gonna see all kinds of amazing things unfold right in front of you.
Well, and that's the key. The unfolding is the key because if you do choose to do that, if you do choose to sit and relax, the animals, not just the birds, but all of the animals begin to sense that.
Mm.
And suddenly squirrels and chipmunks are coming closer or wherever you are in the world than they would ordinarily. I mean, I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6 foot and over 200 pounds. So it takes, it is not a comforting thing for animals to see me coming. But if you sit for a while, and I often bring a cigar and a book
Mm.
if I'm going to go out in the wild for a little bit, and I'll read and have a little bit of cigar. And then when I look up, I'm on the inside of a kaleidoscope of animals. And then I get to watch that and they stay.
Well, you know what Temple Grandin does? She's
No.
she's an autistic woman who was severely autistic, but she's authored dozens of books. She's actually a professor and designs humane situations for animals in captivity. She's a wonderful person, and she thinks like an animal. And that's her own words. She thinks in pictures, not in words. But she has a particular affinity for cows. And what she'll do is she'll go out to a pasture and she'll lie down in the pasture between cow pats, one hopes, and hundreds of thousands of pounds of cows will come gently over, and they'll not trample her, they'll not step on her, they'll not hurt her. They eventually just come over to investigate her. And these are prey animals. I mean, hoofed animals have hooves to run away from their predators. So they're very cautious, but they're also curious. And by just lying there, she will attract these shy but powerful animals who come over to investigate her. And I've always loved that about her.
I think animals have a sense. And I think given a little bit of time, they can tell if you intend harm.
I think so.
I truly do believe that. I don't think they can tell instantly if you're walking down a trail. Their instinct reacts before they have any chance to evaluate you as other than a possible threat. But once they have a little bit of time, it is my experience that, or it is my belief that they can sense that people are not trying to do them harm, or individuals are not trying to do them harm. And so then it peels back these layers that you get to see that are unbelievable. I've had people say, well, you know this, Sy, we've talked about it. I have a fascination with raptors. And people say, how can you stop and just watch a hawk for 2 hours? Because I find everything they do fascinating,
Yeah.
whether they're preening or flying or sleeping or just they're full, they're just checking things out.
Mm.
I like to look around and see what they're checking out.
Yes.
So
A bird's eye
it's
view.
so I want to back up a little bit to the hippo. This is jumping ahead of the order of things I was going to ask you, but from our conversations previously and doing a little bit of research on you biographically, I would like you to talk to us. You have had engagements with, among others, silverback gorillas, vampires, snakes, tarantulas, orangutans, tigers, and in the Amazon, you have swam with piranhas, electric eels, and river dolphins. Tell us about some of those, because most of us never have engagements with those animals. And these engagements, by the way, for those of you watching, this isn't just Sy driving by in a Jeep on an African safari. She is down and dirty in it. So we're going to close today with a parrot story that you're not going to believe. But Sy gets, it's fair to use the word intimate. Sy gets intimately involved with these creatures. So share some of these stories, whatever ones you want to tell.
Well, the pink dolphin stories are pretty fabulous. Pink dolphins, they sound like one of those things that only appears after your third martini, but they really are dolphins. They really are pink, and they live in rivers, not in the sea. And I was fascinated by these because I first saw river dolphins when I was in India researching a tiger book. And they were in the Ganges, the holy river Ganges, which actually has the status of personhood legally in India.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you for a second. What a life you have led that you can start a conversation with. When I was in India studying tigers, I first met river dolphins.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool sentence to be able to string together.
I guess so. Oh, I know how lucky I am. Oh my gosh. So having seen these dolphins rise out of the dark waters of the Ganges and then disappear piqued my interest, and I knew that there was a related species of dolphin in the Amazon. These are pink river dolphins. Inia geoffrensis is the Latin name. And the more I found out about them, I learned that they're storied creatures, and the local people say that the dolphins can turn into human beings, that they will show up at dances as a handsome man or a beautiful woman, a stranger in the village. But of course, someone always falls in love with them and takes them home. And in the morning, you wake up, and beside you, your lover has gone. And the gift that they gave you of a beautiful gold watch or a necklace, which was on the bedside table, has turned into a pile of little silvery fish. So I could not resist getting to know these animals. And so I made several expeditions I think, to the Amazon, to various different parts of the Amazon. And they were really hard to see because they don't leap out of the water like marine dolphins do. They
Right.
stay low, and that's why they have a low dorsal fin. If you had a tall dorsal fin and you were swimming in the flooded forest, you'd be banging your dorsal fin on the branches of the flooded trees because the water half the year goes up and it actually inundates the trees. So I kept coming back and trying to study them. A friend of mine had telemetry on the dolphins. I was trying to follow them. Another place that I knew, the local people had lots of great stories about them, and we'd go out in our canoes, and they would come up and they would look at your canoe and they would open the top of their head, that blowhole, and gasp, cha, and then you turn and they would have dived back again. Well, it wasn't until my final trip, I flew into a town called Tefe and went to a little town called Alter do Chão in Brazil. And I had heard that there was a man who regularly swam with pink dolphins that were his friends off of this little spit of land. Well, I could not reach him. This was in the 1990s, and there was not a lot of reliable internet or email or anything. So I just went and I went looking for him, and he was gone. But I found his boatman, and his boatman took me to that spot. And I would swim out about a quarter mile into the river and just tread water. And 7 pink dolphins would come to me every day and swim with me. And they wouldn't just hang out. They, as you know, dolphins have echolocation. They can throw out sound waves with which they can actually see a picture in their brains, almost like a sonogram of a pregnant woman's fetus. I could feel them sounding me. And it felt like when you kind of hum with your teeth locked together, it was this like vibration. So I knew that the dolphins, as well as looking at me underwater and above water, that they were looking at my insides, that they could see inside my heart. They could see I have a faulty valve in my heart. They could see what I had eaten for breakfast. They could see I did not have a baby in my womb. They could see inside my lungs. And another thing that they did with me too, which was just so splendid and wonderful, sometimes one would swim underneath me and let go this effusion of bubbles, and the bubbles would sizzle up my skin. They were doing this on purpose for some reason, and I wondered, like, why are they doing it? It felt really cool. I loved it. When
That's a pro.
I got home and I found that in captivity in the Duisburg, Germany zoo, they had the same species, and they would do it to each other. So it was like giving each other a massage with bubbles.
Wow. I've shared a little bit of that when we lived in Southern California. You know, there are large pods of dolphins that are in the Santa Barbara Channel. And my son and I used to take our jet skis out into the middle of the channel. And when the pods would come by, they like to play. We would jump off the jet skis and just swim in the Pacific Ocean. And the dolphins would come by and they would brush against us.
Oh my gosh.
We would each be, you know, in the water and hanging there, and the dolphins would come by and they would literally, they never once hurt us. They never once ran into
Mm.
us, but because clearly they didn't have to if they didn't want to. I mean, you know, but they would brush up against our sides and against our legs and against
Oh
our
my
rib cage.
gosh.
And we would have these bottlenose dolphin, and then the whole pod would pass. One time there was a pod that the rangers estimated was over 2,000 dolphins. That this happened with. So then we would go and we would go back way out in front of them and drop again. And we got way in front of them, so they would have the option of avoiding us if they wanted to,
Mhm.
but they chose not to. They would come at us and again brush us. And anyway, so I have an affinity, not quite as intimate as what you went through, but there is just something about it, and you do feel as if you've been temporarily welcomed into a club.
Mm. Yes.
You know, they're saying, you know what? And to your point, you know, they have to trust you for that to occur. They have to believe there's going to be no harm. And you mentioned your heart and your lungs and your womb and your this, but it's your soul that they're seeing into, in my view.
I-
And once they've checked that out, they're good.
Yeah.
Once they see that that's not black, then if you have a heart murmur or if you aren't pregnant or whatever it might be, and I think that's something that will grow with time. I think as we open up to that as being a possibility in this world again, and you need to talk to me about gorillas and orangutans, other animals that are, you know, that people believe they can communicate with. But while we're still in the Amazon, Is this when you swam with piranhas and electric eels and dolphins?
Yes.
Or was that another? It
Yes,
was.
yes, and there are way more electric eels out there than you would suspect. There have been some censuses that, the waters are full of electric eels, and you would think that everyone would be getting electrocuted left and right, but they don't harm you. If you touch them, they will shock you, and I have done that, with captive electric eel. Just
How bad is the shock?
it's, it is strong enough that your hand without your volition goes flying up out of the tank like that. Um, I once a weasel had bitten an electric cord, and to rescue the weasel that was getting electrocuted, I pulled the weasel away from the electric cord. It felt like that.
Okay.
So,
So, like, if you're a little kid and your parents don't stop and you put a fork in the electrical outlet,
oh my god, oh my god, it
guilty.
hurt. Oh, did you really? Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, wow. Gee, yeah.
Yep.
So it's painful, but it stops hurting the minute you are no longer the current is no longer charging through you. And electric eels, they never hurt me at all. I have heard of people who stood in the shallows while 12 electric eels, one after another, just swam through their legs. They're not going to hurt you, but they're really cool. They're really cool animals. And piranhas, everyone thinks piranhas are going to skeletonize you instantly. They think like, oh, if there's blood in the water, that's the end of you. Well, I've been swimming in the water bleeding with piranhas and was never even nibbled. My friend Scott Dowd, who I know from the New England Aquarium and now works with the very excellent Project Piaba, which is helping to preserve the Amazon. He has been in the middle of a piranha mating frenzy with piranhas literally bouncing off his head and never been bitten. So many of the things that we're very afraid of in the wild, they're not going to hurt you. Tarantulas, for example, I wrote a book about tarantulas and I worked with the wonderful, wonderful researcher Sam Marshall in French Guiana in South America. And this is like the tarantula capital of the world. Now, there's some tarantulas who really don't want you to pick them up and they can give you a bite, but not one of the hundreds of species of tarantula on Earth, not one has venom potent enough to kill a healthy adult human. And we think there are all these deadly things. I
Mhm.
can pick up, depending on the species, some species really don't want to be picked up, but I can pick up a wild tarantula in the jungle if I'm picking the right species and know that she's not going to bite me or hurt me in any way. They're just like furry little chipmunks, you know? In a way, spiders are less scary to some people when they're really big. So tarantulas are lovely. Some can live to 30 years. They know.
I did not know that.
Yeah, yeah. And they're not, I'm finding too that many of the creatures that we dismiss as, oh, something like that couldn't possibly have consciousness, like mollusks. You know that an octopus is a mollusk related to clams and snails. Well, they're very smart animals. So we shouldn't dismiss anybody because they're an invertebrate or because they're a mollusk or because they don't look like us or because they don't act like us. Everyone out there, all sentient life, thinks and feels and knows stuff and has something so valuable to teach us and is keeping the world whole and alive.
Do you think it's ignorance or fear that leads us to do that, to dismiss everything as less than we are? I just finished last night. Do you know David Gessner?
Yes. I mean, I don't know
Okay.
personally, but yeah, I know.
Okay. So I just finished his book last night. I want to make sure I get the title right. Leave It As It Is. It's a book about Teddy Roosevelt, and he's very conflicted about and he's going to come on the show soon to talk about it.
Cool.
But he's very conflicted about Teddy Roosevelt and that, Teddy Roosevelt saved tens of millions of acres of land and did all the
But
things he did.
also,
At the
yeah, a
at the
lot.
same time, he killed quite a few animals. And so when in reading David's book, that's a theme throughout the book is I'm trying to balance all of the good that he did with this, and I'm trying to make sure I'm not taking today's sensitivities and placing it 100 years ago and all of those things that you do when we're judging historical characters. But we we as humans, quite a few humans, either dismiss other animals, don't even think about them, or think they're less than we are. And I wonder how much of that is fear, how much of that is arrogance.
A lot of it is
What
arrogance, I think. And
you think?
yeah, I totally do. I just reviewed a book for the American Scholar by the Harvard researcher Christine Webb called The Arrogant Ape, and that's describing us. And in it, she makes the same argument that I am making either explicitly or implicitly in all of my work. And that is that we err greatly when we think that we're just too that we're the top of everything, that humans reign supreme. And this is not the case in all human cultures. It is in the modern West at this time, but it is not the case in a lot of native cultures in which animals are our kin, our brethren, are they're creatures who think and feel and know. But I think when we decide that we are supreme, it allows us to eat and crowd out and pollute and dismiss the lives of others, and not just other animals, but other people as well. If we look
Mhm.
at the way that we have treated Black and brown people in the West, if we look at the way that we have treated women in so many cultures, it's always, you can trace it right back to the people in power saying we're in power now because we're supreme. And what's so
Uh-huh.
funny too is that many scientists and philosophers have tried to explain why humans are supreme, because only we have, and then you can fill in the blank with thing after thing after thing that current research shows animals have too, such as tool use. Remember, you're near my age, and you
Mhm.
were
68.
yeah. So in 1960, when Jane Goodall went into the field, a few years later, she reported that chimpanzees used tools. Until then, it was believed that only humans use tools. Now we know.
And she was initially
Oh,
dismissed.
totally. They didn't
The
publish the
scientific community,
paper.
in part because she was a woman, but in part because she was going against things that the established community had published.
Exactly, and my first book is actually about her and Dian Fossey and Brute Yaldicus, and how, the primates, they were all protégés of the same person, Louis Leakey, who intentionally went out to get women and to get people who were not indoctrinated in the whole scientific culture so they might see new things. And they actually were happy to create relationships with their study subjects, which previous researchers avoided at all cost. They named their study animals instead of numbering them like rocks. They recognized them as individuals, and they used their relationships with these animals as tools of inquiry, and in this way revolutionized the whole way we do ethology. And that's what I wrote about in that book. But we know today that not just chimpanzees, who are so closely related to us that you can get a blood transfusion from a chimp, but not just chimps, but even fish and insects make and use tools. That human beings are so far from being the only creatures that use tools. And all of these the only animals that can reason, the only animals that can solve problems, this has so been shown to be false. We just don't know how to look close enough to see the animals doing these things that
I'm going to disagree with you just a little bit out of respect. I don't think it's a matter of us not looking closely enough. I think it's a matter of not thinking that we need to.
that
I think if we go back to the ignorance thing, I think a large percentage of people enjoy being ignorant. It's much easier to say, this is the way it is, this is the way it's always been, and I don't need to evaluate it or look at it or be challenged. And then you can just move on.
Mm.
It takes a certain humbleness, it takes a certain amount of self-awareness, in my view, to try to look at things differently, to see them as maybe others have not seen them. But to your point, once you open your mind to that, all you have to do is watch ravens solve problems. I mean, they're a much better puzzle solver than I
oh
am.
my gosh, yeah.
The ones with the rocks and the water and the sticks and the
Yeah,
whole thing.
yeah.
And I'd starve to death, and the raven would be it'd be the world's first 4-pound
Yeah,
raven.
they're so smart. And
Well,
so, they are great at creating relationships. They have an extremely great way of communicating with large groups of other ravens and crows. As you know, crows have culture and they pass this down to other crows. I'm referring to John Marsleff's studies in which
mhm.
they maybe your listeners already know about him. He's a great, great guy. And um he would band crows so that he could identify them, but they don't like that. And so they started to tell the other crows, like, avoid this guy and his graduate students. They're really bad. And then they would harass him and his graduate students on campus.
I've read those studies. Yeah,
Walk
that's
around with a big
fascinating.
black crowd of birds screaming and dive bombing. So what they would do is that they would wear masks when they were banding the birds. So then they could walk, unmasked in their normal lives. But the birds told all the other birds, all the other crows about those masked people. And it
And they passed it
they passed it on
they
for like
passed it down
7 years.
generationally.
Yeah, I know. I think it was like 11 years. How long does a crow hold a grudge? And it's like 11 years.
Well, and there are a number of instances where we have witnessed ravens and crows grieving, holding funerals or wakes, if you will. It is now we're going to shift gears completely because you have to tell me about the time you were undressed by an orangutan. And I'm 68 years old. I'm a fairly inquisitive, well-read man. I've never once asked somebody what it was like to be undressed by an orangutan, but I'm going to do it today. And with respect, by the way, Sy puts this on her own website. I haven't dug stuff up from her past, but please, you've got to tell the audience about this.
Well, I was researching my first book, the one I was just telling you about on
What is the name of it? You didn't share the
it's
name.
called Walking with the Great Apes, and it's
Okay.
about Jane Goodall, Dian Fossey, and Bruta Galdikas. So I went to Dr. Galdikas's research site in Indonesian Borneo and spent 3 weeks there. And there, she works with wild orangutans, and also she has raised a number of orphaned baby orangutans who now live free and wild around her camp. But while they were living with her, they learned that humans have a lot of really interesting stuff. And so when volunteers and researchers come to her camp, they've got to hold on to all their stuff really, really closely or it will be stolen. So to take a bath, what we did was we went to this little pool that, by the way, had a false crocodile in it, but he never bothered us. And we would wear
I'm sorry. What is a false crocodile?
it's called a garavel. It's basically a crocodile, but it's a fish-eating crocodile, and they didn't bother us. And he usually was on this side, and we were on this side. So we would go into this little pool to bathe, and we would wear a bathing suit and a modest little cover-up, and take our towels down there. Well, I was wearing a cover-up with the zipper in the back. And orangutans would hang around this pool because they knew that you had cool stuff like soap, which they would eat, and shampoo, which they would drink, and towels, which they would take. But this orangutan, it was a female, and she understood how to work a zipper. So she came up to me and very gently and slowly unzipped my little cover up. And I wanted to see what she was going to do. I'm not going to have a fight with an orangutan. They're so strong they could rip you in half if they felt like it, but they don't. So she gently lifted my dress up above my head, and then she put her arms through the armholes and her head through the neck and went off into the forest wearing my little cover up, which I never saw again.
Okay. Well, see, there's another one. That's a story you don't hear often.
No, oh my gosh.
That's an unusual story. Thank you for sharing it and clarifying, because from the time I read that, I thought, you know what, there's got to be a good story behind that. But I'm glad that you were able to share that with me. What about your encounter with silverback gorillas and tigers?
Well, I went to both Rwanda and what was then the country of Zaire, now Congo, in Africa to do the Dian Fossey portion of my book. And I went to Kenya and Tanzania for the Jane portion. Before I was working on this book, though, I had an opportunity to go with Mountain Travel. It was their first expedition ever to the mountain gorillas of Rwanda. And then we went on to Zaire. Well, in Zaire, they didn't have a very good program in place at the time, allowing tourists to visit with habituated gorillas. You just kind of went into the forest and hoped you found a gorilla. Well, we were in the forest looking for a gorilla, and I looked up and I saw this guy just running in great distress towards me. And I soon saw why. He was being pursued by a very unhappy gorilla. Well, I was happy to see the gorilla, but I didn't want to see an angry gorilla. And fortunately, I can speak some French, so I told him what he needed to do to get the gorilla to stop chasing him. Now, the thing is, with a human, you look into their face, you look into their eyes, and that's perfectly fine, like I'm doing with you now. A gorilla, that's a threat. So what he needed to do was stop running, turn around, look at the ground, and hit the ground as if bowing before a king. And it's exactly what you don't want to do when a big angry animal is chasing you. But if it's a gorilla, that's what you have to do.
It is counterintuitive.
Absolutely. But I knew this from having read Diane Fossey's work and from having been instructed by other people. So we both did this. And the gorilla then stood up, cocked his chest, dropped his jaw, let out this horrifying vocalization, asserted that he was the king and that we were just the visitors. And then he calmly turned around and led us to his family.
Wow.
So
how did you know he was inviting you to follow him?
Well, if he didn't want us to follow, he would have run faster or been aggressive, but he was calm.
I have to share this with you. My wife and I were in Africa a few months ago with some friends of ours from England, and we were out on the Serengeti, and we were staying in tents, and we were told, there was a central eating area, and then there were 9 tents, 5 on one side, 4 on the other, and we were told by the people that ran it that we were not allowed to go outside after dark by ourselves because of the lions and the elephants. Well, fair enough. I understand that. So if you wanted to leave your tent in the middle of the night, you had to flash your light, and then they'd send a guide down. But when you're leaving the eating area, it was dark. So our very first night there, I was saying to my wife, I think we could get to the tent without a guide. I mean, I can see the tent, She said, no, we're going to do it by the rules. So we go down. We're the last tent in the row, and we're walking. It's just my wife and I carrying our bags, and in front of us, there's a guide with a flashlight. And all of a sudden, this male bull elephant comes charging through the trees. When I say through the trees, didn't bother trying to weave, just through the trees, and came right down the trail at us. And the guy turned and yelled, "Run."
Oh, shit.
And I said to my wife, I could have done that. We didn't need to wait. My instinct was to turn and run. It was to regret not having an adult diaper, but it was then to turn and run. And I said to the guy afterwards, I said, "What? I'm sorry. Why do we need you? I could have identified the elephant. I wasn't going to confuse it with one of the native goats. And my instinct was to turn and run. What were you there for?" And he said, "I had the flashlight."
Oh, geez. Oh,
okay. Well, I am comforted by that fact. So we're good to go there. Anyway, okay. I want to talk about some of your books before I lose you here. Tell me what the chicken knows, which, if you don't know, is a title of one of Sy's recent books, right?
Yeah. Well,
okay.
The chicken
so tell me what the chicken knows.
Well, the chicken knows how to recognize your face. May even have a name for you. The chicken knows.
Whoa, back up. How do I know that?
Well, there's ways to test this. Chickens actually recognize like 100 other chickens by their faces, and you can tell this by their behavior. And researchers discovered that they recognize them by their faces by actually altering the chickens' faces by giving them a fake comb or changing things around in their feathers. If you change anything on their body, they'll still be fine as long as they can recognize the face. It's just like a person wearing a mask. You can't recognize your friend wearing a mask, but you can recognize them if they're wearing a raincoat or if they're wearing a sweater or if they're wearing a bathing suit. But if you put a mask on their face, you'll have trouble. And chickens do the same. Chickens also know a lot about spatial mapping. They can find their way around and remember where things are. to a degree that I cannot. I have a terrible sense of direction. Chickens are brilliant about mapping their space. And again, there's been ways that scientists have tested this in a laboratory setting, but you can see it in your
If nothing else, because they come home to roost every night.
They do actually. And
Mhm.
I was astonished when I got my first flock. I kept them inside in their coop for the first couple of days. And then when I let them go, I thought, what if I never see them again? And my friend Gretchen, who gave me the flock, said, don't worry, they'll come back. And they went out and they could forage over acres and acres and acres. They were completely free range. At the end of the day, as dusk closed in, they came right back. So and me, I get lost in my own backyard. I literally, as a teenager, was lost in my own backyard once. It was pretty pathetic. We just moved to yet another new house. And you know how when you're going away from your hotel or from your house, you're looking out there. You're not looking at what it looks like when you turn around and you're trying to find your
Right.
way home.
Yep.
So that's what happened to me. And chickens also have a lot of instinctual knowledge, or essentially knowledge passed down genetically from their ancestors, the same way that we have knowledge passed down from our ancestors, but theirs doesn't come from books. It comes right in their genes. Chickens know a lot, and it's such a shame that people dismiss them as kind of like walking vegetables that just walk around saying bok, bok, bok. They can say all kinds of meaningful things to other chickens, including aerial predator coming in close and fast, or terrestrial predator kind of far away, don't worry about it. They can say, here is some really delicious food versus the meh food has just appeared. And this is just the calls that people have begun to understand. You know, we have taught our language to a number of birds, notably parrots, who can speak to you in meaningful English. But not one person has learned the language of any animal. So I think it's foolish for us to dismiss the intelligence of anybody when all the tests we tend to give them are tests that were devised usually with what they call weird people. They're Western, they're educated, they have high incomes, they just not representative of humans in general. They usually are graduate students. Graduate students are not representative of humanity in general. And all the graduate students are free range. Whereas most of the animals that are being tested in these intelligence tests have been raised in a laboratory, which is an impoverished situation that physically damages your brain. So, yeah, and you've heard birds dismissed as bird brains.
Right. I do a thing called field notes at the end of each podcast, just a 5-7 minute thing on something I find fascinating about nature. And last week was Laura Erickson was my guest, and her favorite bird by far is a black-capped chickadee. And as I was doing some studying about that, I discovered that the number of D's in their song is a language. Multiple D's that's a real danger. A couple of D's is it's a squirrel. They don't eat us anyway. And it's not exact, but nonetheless, I will tell you a quick chicken story. My wife and I had a flock of a dozen for years, and we called them the girls. So two parts of that. Number one is they ate everything except they didn't like citrus. Unfortunately, as we discovered, they actually did eat chicken. So we would feed them all of our leftovers. I mean, they were great for that, right? And when I would go to restaurants in the business I was in, I probably ate 10 meals a week out at restaurants with clients and colleagues. And I got to the point where I was taking home everything. If you ordered breakfast and some parsley came on the side, the waitress or the waiter would come by to take the place. I said, no, you need to put that in the box. And they looked at me like I'm crazy. It was a corner of a piece of toast and a piece of parsley, but the birds ate all of it. But the other thing to the recognition is two of the birds were exactly the same. If you put them in front of you, maybe you could, but my wife and I could not tell them apart. So we took to painting the toenails of one of them with nail polish. Well, she grew to love that to the point where if we would go down into the chicken coop, we kept chairs because we would go sit in the evening and just talk to the chickens. As soon as I sat down, the one would jump up on my lap and stick one of her legs straight out and wait for my wife to take it and paint the nails. And then she'd set it back down and she'd stick the other leg out. And my wife would paint that. And then she would jump off and go play with the other girls. But she had to get her nails painted.
Oh,
And it was just, and you're right, they became, a part of the family. And they were, I don't know how intelligent they are relative to an orangutan or a dolphin or even a parrot. But to your point, it's not just a walking chicken breast.
yes.
And they are sentient beings. And anyway, it was really kind of a neat thing. Now what we need to do, and we are going to talk about 3 turtle books down the road, your turtle trilogy, your trifecta, but you do have 2 octopus books.
It's true. I have 4.
Oh, I'm way out of line.
Wait, let me see. I have Secrets of the Octopus and the Soul
I'm
of
aware.
an Octopus for adults. I have a book called The Octopus Scientist for grade school kids, and a picture book called Inky's Amazing Escape.
I must have only looked at your adult books to get the 2. But tell us, obviously you're fascinated with octopus. You don't. And by the way, in my younger life, late teens, early 20s, there was a marine biology period and I loved studying octopus. I just found them fascinating. So I'm curious where your fascination came from, and does it continue through to today? Is there now, I was going to ask if there was a 3rd book, but is there a 5th octopus book in our future?
Oh, probably not immediately. But when you visit an aquarium, if you go see the octopus and the octopus is awake, I think many of us have had this experience that you're looking at the animal and the animal is looking back at you, and you kind of felt a connection there. And when I went in to do Soul of an Octopus, my first octopus book, that was in 2011.
I'm sorry. Another sentence very few people get to say. My first octopus book.
Right.
That's not one you hear all the time at dinner parties.
No, alas. When I first went in to do this, I wanted to look at intelligence and consciousness in an animal as different from us as I could find. Because for so long, Western philosophers and scientists have wanted to dismiss the even possibility of consciousness in anything but humans. And I think all of us, even as children, know that is folly. And we know from our dogs.
Maybe especially as children.
Well, yes. Before we buy the lie that we are the be all and end all and the only important species. And I mean, it's such a sad lie because it isolates us from the rest of this glorious world. And we don't want to be on top of some tall tower looking down. I mean, I don't want to be there. I want to be embedded in the heart of life and embraced by all my relatives and mentors and friends of so many different species. It's so much of a richer life. To just have friends who are humans is as sad as just listening to one song your whole life or just eating one kind of food your whole life. It makes you feel so much more alive to be embedded in all of life. So anyway, I wanted to write about consciousness, and if I could find evidence of consciousness in something as distantly related to a human as an octopus, who is, as we know, a mollusk related to clams and snails, well, that kind of meant that the whole world was alive. And that was kind of the story of, my friendships with these octopuses and what they taught me. And what they taught me was something that was said very long ago, attributed to the pre-Socratic Greek philosopher Thales. The universe, he said, is alive and has fire in it and is full of gods. And to me, what that means is our world is far more animate, more emotional, more full of love than we imagine, and that all of it is sacred. So that kind of names what I wanted to do with that book, and what I want to do with my life is to spread that.
Well, that would be the perfect ending to this podcast if I was so bold as to end it, but I'm not. Um, but it would be, by the way. Every once in a while you watch a movie and you think, oh, that's the perfect ending to the movie. And then they go on. Well, we're going to risk going on because there are things we haven't covered. Now, a lot of the viewers and listeners are birders, as you know. Um, and you have written bird books. You've written The Hawk's Way, The Hummingbird's Gift, and Birdology among your bird books, and the parrot book, which we're going to get to. But get my birders excited. Get my birding listeners excited. Tell them about a couple of the books. Tell them about The Hawk's Way, since I'm a raptor guy.
Oh, well, for The Hawk's Way, I learned falconry and got to know a number of birds, particularly Harris hawks, in a very intimate way. And this was an unusual thing for me because I've been a vegetarian for 40 years, and falconry, as you know, is hunting. It is venery. And I actually thought venery might be one of the 7 deadly sins. But I actually, even though I don't eat meat myself, I came to understand what is called yarrick by falconers. In a hawk's heart, what they want is to hunt. They want that chase. They want that chase even more than they want to eat that meat. That is what makes their soul sing. And by being a falconer, I could participate in that. And it was unlike anything else I had ever done.
For those of you that haven't read the book, The Hawk's Way, it is a beautifully written and researched book. I found it to be magnificent. And I'm a giant fan of hawks. But probably the best part of the book was Sy taking us through the journey as she struggled with participating in killing animals as a longtime vegetarian. And she shared with us those struggles and what she went through. And I found that to be remarkably generous as a human and as a writer, to walk us through that process, to let us know that when you were going out there to release a hawk, knowing it was going to go kill something, that you certainly never became thrilled with it, but you understood it. And it harkens back to the early part of our conversation, because you had an open mind. You were willing to look at things differently. I think it would be very easy and consistent for a vegetarian to say, I will never be involved in falconry. Why would I have a falcon kill an animal for me when I don't want it done for myself? I think that's not an illogical conclusion to reach. But the fact that you explored that and went out there and made yourself do it, and then broke through to a place like you just shared with us, where you understood the hawk. It didn't mean that you were suddenly going to start having burgers for dinner and chicken for lunch, but you understood why the hawk did. And that was the magic of that book. Whether you're a birder or not, watching somebody go through that journey, and someone who can express it as well as Sy does, that is a gift. And I could say this about a dozen of her books, but if you only pick up one and you want to watch somebody go through a personal journey, The Hawk's Way is one of my favorites of Sy's books. And so thank you for the book. Speaking of favorites, I have a 4-year-old grandson. If I could only read him one of your books, what would it be?
I would have it be The Book of Turtles.
Okay.
Or the coming book, The True and Lucky Life of a Turtle.
Okay, we're going to go out of order then, because I was going to ask you about your favorite day in the parrot, which I still am. And we were going to close with turtles, but we're just going to transition right into turtles now.
Okay.
So here's what
we have a date with a turtle, and an expedition that I actually have to be in a pond in like 5 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I could talk to you forever, but I had budgeted only 1 hour.
I had asked you to only budget 1 hour. And so I'll tell you what, we will save parrots for another day and another conversation, because we will have you back. But take the 5 minutes and tell me about what you're calling the turtle trifecta.
Okay, great. Well, I wrote a book for adults, narrative nonfiction, which is now out in paperback, and it's called On Time and Turtles Mending the World Shell by Shattered Shell. That is a book about the problems that turtles face in the world, and my effort with Matt Patterson, a fabulous wildlife artist and turtle aficionado, to learn how to heal them by working with turtle rescue and some of the organizations that are protecting turtles. But we also did a book for children called The Book of Turtles, that tell the most astonishing things about turtles. That turtles, there's some species of turtles who can run faster than a 10-year-old. There are turtles who climb trees. There are turtles who croak and who cry and who, there's turtles whose shells will glow in the dark. I mean, there's turtles. We all know what turtles are. We all recognize turtles, but they are astonishing. But the book that's coming out next month in September is called The True and Lucky Life of a Turtle, and it is about the turtle star of time and turtles, and his name is Fire Chief. And he's a 42-pound snapping turtle, and that's who I have the date with now, and with some other people who are waiting for me. Turtles are great at waiting, but the people aren't great at waiting. So he was hit by a car, and his shell was cracked in 2018, and his legs were paralyzed, as was his tail. And I started working at Turtle Rescue League as a volunteer with Matt in 2020. And our job with Fire Chief was to do physical therapy so he could regain use of his legs. And this is the story of that turtle, from when he hatched out of an egg the size of a coin to when he found the pond that he lived in for maybe 60 years, to the unlucky moment that he was hit by a car, and everything that happened to him since then. And it's got a happy ending because I'm going to be swimming with him in 5 minutes.
Sy, I am so thrilled that you were here. I'm so excited. I want to tell you the story. My wife and I actually had our property become a turtle rescue facility, and we started with a turtle that was hit by a car and its shell was cracked. So we can tell that story. You owe me a parrot story. You owe me snake stories. You owe me, well, O is the wrong word. I would love to have with you. I have to let Sy go because, and this may only happen once in my podcasting career, but she has a date with a turtle, and I do not want to keep a woman from a date with a turtle. So we're going to let her go. Hey, if you enjoyed the show, share it with somebody, let them know. I'm going to beg Sy to come back and be on the show another day. And Sy, there's so many other things, so many other books that I want to talk about, so many other experiences, but we're going to have to do it. For today, this is all that Sy can give us, and it has been a tremendous amount that you have shared. So I'm going to ask you all to stay curious, have a blessed day, take care, and we will have Sy back with us. Thank you, Sy.
My pleasure. This was a joy, and I can't wait to come back.
Enjoy the turtle.
Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to this edition of Field Notes. If it's your first time in, Field Notes is a little segment we do following every one of our main episodes, and it's where we highlight a particular animal or a park or maybe an environmental issue, but we focus on one thing, share some interesting facts and stories about it, and hope to get you intrigued maybe to look further into it. Today, we're going to be talking about octopus, or plural octopi, although you can say octopuses, but I just don't like the way that sounds. So we're going to say octopi. I'm going to share about 10 different facts with you that I hope intrigue you to learn more about them. The first one is, and this is a great one, they've got 3 hearts. They have 2 gill hearts that pump blood through their gills, and they have a third heart that pumps the oxygen-rich blood throughout their body. And interestingly enough, when an octopus swims, that third heart can occasionally stop while they're swimming. It's not fatal, but it's not great, which is one of the reasons it is supposed that octopi like to crawl instead of swimming, although they are quite capable of swimming. Second fact, they have blue blood. Having worked with octopi when I was a younger man and interested in marine biology, I know this to be true. It is not because they have old money, which is a way that the blue blood phrase is used, but it's because they use a copper-based hemocyanin, I believe I pronounced that correctly, instead of an iron-based hemoglobin. So, for example, most of us have red blood. Octopus have blue blood. They're amazing at camouflage. They can instantly change skin color, skin texture can go from rough to smooth, and even their patterns. And they can do this because they have specialized skin cells. Again, I'll hope to get these pronounced right. Chromatophores, iridophores, and lucifores. And octopus have been known to change their appearance up to 1,000 times in a single day, which is amazing. But having watched them and studied them for hours at a time, I know this to be true because I watch them change constantly. They change based on their environment and things that they input, but they also change based on their emotions, which they do have. Octopuses are amazingly intelligent. They have roughly 500 million neurons. I didn't know exactly what that meant, but to give you an idea, it is comparable to a dog's brain. And about 2/3 of those are located in their arms, which means that if the arm is severed, it can still act with a bit of autonomy for a while before it dies off, which can be a little disconcerting the first time you see that, or maybe even the second or third time. They are amazing tool users and problem solvers. They can open jars. They can solve a variety of puzzles that humans can impose on them. They use tools like, say, a coconut shell as a temporary shelter, and they have certainly been known to escape from their enclosures. And I've witnessed that when we used to work on Rincon Island back in the 70s, and we had octopus out there. If you did not secure those aquariums that you had them in, those octopus would be gone the next day. I mean, you had to make sure everything was just locked down tight, and it was truly amazing. The giant Pacific octopus, which is the biggest of all octopuses, by the way, the word giant is not a misnomer. They can get up to 14 feet long, are commonly found at 150 pounds. And there are reports of them getting up to 600 pounds, not verified scientifically, but nonetheless reports that are worth paying attention to. But they are frequently captured and used in aquariums and in zoos. They can recognize their human caretakers and have even shown playfulness. And again, I have seen that firsthand, and so I have no doubt that it is true. They're a pretty amazing animal to watch. Maybe if you've seen them somewhere out in the wild or in an enclosure, you might have seen them release ink. It's a defensive reaction for octopus when they feel threatened, and it provides them dark coverage, and it's a sensory disruptor, hopefully, for the predator that might be choosing to chase them. And venom, they are all venomous. They use that to kill their prey, or at least to subdue it and then finish it off. But that venom is not dangerous to human beings, with a single exception. If you run into a tiny blue-ringed octopus, stay away, because that one can pose a significant danger to people. There is an octopus called the mimic octopus, which, beyond its ability to change texture and color and patterns, can impersonate marine species, including lionfish, flatfish, and sea snakes. I've never seen that live. I would love to. It must be amazing. And I have no doubt that they're very, very good about it. What's one thing that's kind of cool about octopus is that they have parrot-like beaks. So if you've seen parrot beaks, octopus beaks are very similar to that, but they are indigestible. They do not break down with stomach acids. And so when an octopus is predated, which they quite often are, by marine mammals or sharks or seabirds, you will find that those beaks are still in the stomach of whatever animal is eating them, and they will never go away, which is kind of weird. One of the animals that predates octopus are lobsters, and octopus also eat lobsters. It just depends on the size differential. A large lobster will kill and eat a small octopus, and a large octopus will kill and eat a small lobster. Back in the old days, in the 1970s, it's now illegal, although frankly it may have been then, but I hope the statute of limitations has run out. But if we used to go down and we'd try to get a lobster to come out of a rock crevice, and sometimes they get back there deep and you just couldn't reach in and grab them, you would take an old string mop or a yarn mop, the ones with the wooden handle and the little white stringy things coming out. And if you twirled that around in front of a lobster, that was a red flag to a bull. They couldn't resist it. They would come charging out, which is why they're outlawed. You're not even allowed to have them on boats, at least in Southern California, those kind of string mops anymore, just for that reason. And speaking back of those giant Pacific octopus, Sy Montgomery, and I'll tell you about her books in just a moment. But in one of her books, she talks about a giant Pacific octopus that weighs as much as a man and stretches as long as a car, can fit between an opening as small as an orange. It's because they have a boneless body. But I mean, just imagine something that massive. Let's say 200 pounds and 10 to 12 feet long and fitting through an opening the size of an orange. That's why they're so hard to keep captive, because they are smart, they're creative, they're nimble, they have suction in their 8 legs. They just have ways of getting out. They are fantastic at that. Last thing I want to do is mention Sy Montgomery again, who has written her 39th book comes out next month. All of them about animals, all of them about nature, 4 of them about octopus, 2 of them for adults, Secrets of the Octopus, and her New York Times best-selling book, The Soul of an Octopus. She's also written 2 children's books about octopuses, Inky's Amazing Escape and The Octopus Scientist. I hope I've given you some fun information about octopus. I hope it's intriguing for you. Maybe go check out some of the YouTube videos that show how they can escape or open jars or whatnot, or get a chance to go out in some tide pools and poke around and lift up some rocks and see if you can't find some. But no matter what, man, stay safe, stay safe. I'll try to speak correctly, and stay curious. Have a great day.